Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the Criterion Collection review series, where we're going through my personal Criterion Collection as I review all of them in order. And today's release is going to be very interesting because it's actually the first Criterion I ever owned. And if you've watched the video I made on the Criterion Collection, which is what spurned this idea, then you probably already have a pretty good idea of how I feel about this movie, but I thought this would be a good way to sort of expand on it and keep within the chronology of everything. So today's movie is going to be 12 Angry Men, number 591 in the collection, directed by Sidney Lumet, starring Henry Fonda. Now, if you haven't seen 12 Angry Men, you most likely have heard of it. I would argue it's one of the most famous courtroom dramas that's ever been made. But in terms of my history with this release, as I mentioned earlier, it is the first Criterion I ever bought, and if you want to know more about my journey towards buying it and choosing it out of the literal hundreds of other choices, you can check out the video I made on the Criterion Collection. But needless to say, it is the release that made me get into buying Criterions, to collecting them, to really getting into blind buying movies and understanding, especially with the Criterion Collection, that, you know, even though I don't know what the movie is or haven't seen it, I'm at least going to get something worth owning with the special features, with the movie itself, with the booklet, everything. I think this is one of the prime examples of an extremely solid release. So for those of you that don't know the plot to 12 Angry Men, it's a very simple, almost bottle film where you have 12 jurors that have to decide the fate of I want to say he's a Latino boy who's been accused of stealing. It's either stealing or murder. I'm forgetting. I'll be honest with you right now. I haven't watched the movie since January, but many of the details are still fresh in my mind. Except, of course, the plot. But he is accused of a pretty heinous crime and is set to serve a pretty serious amount of jail time. And 11 of the jurors all agree the kid did it, lock him up, not even worth a discussion. But one juror, played by Henry Fonda, is sort of the voice of reason. He's like, well, I can't prove the kid didn't do it, but I think it's worth discussing. I think it's worth looking over everything, getting into it. You know, we are determining a person's life. You know, there's a lot more weight to this than just our prejudice would allow. And it becomes a film about sort of the not only the sort of the masculine tendencies of these men to sort of get at each other's throats, and the sort of the boiling pressure of the room and of the mood, but also about underlying prejudices and how they can blind us and make us feel certain ways. So, you know, 12 Angry Men is a movie that takes place almost entirely in one room. And my favorite thing about the film is the way that Sidney Lumet shoots it. Where I believe this was his first feature film. Beforehand, he'd only done like commercials and TV and had done a lot of like television plays. And so once given, you know, the reins to really mess with the film, to go with editing rather than shooting live, he really takes advantage of it. Where, you know, we're in a tiny room, ostensibly. It's, you know, maybe a little bit bigger than the size of my bedroom right here, right? And he keeps finding new ways to shoot it, to shoot the actors. And my favorite touch of his is, as the discussions get more and more intense, the camera sort of gets closer and closer in on the actors. But my favorite detail is the way that Sidney Lumet changes the camera angles between each act, almost, or during each act, where at the beginning of each act, the camera is in wide shots, showing a lot of the room, showing a lot of the jurors, focused a lot on everybody's individual reactions to what a specific person is saying. But then as tensions build, as less people become a part of the conversation, and it becomes a debate between a select number of people, we get very close-ups of their faces. We see the anger, we see the sweat, we see every emotion going into their arguments. And it helps to make the film feel way more intense than it already is. And you just get so invested in this because it really is a battle of the minds. And I think that's one thing I really respect about the film, is just how straightforward it is. At the end of the day, we're just watching 12 guys debate, you know? But because the actors are so good in this movie and the arguments are so well written, it makes everything so engaging and so worth it. And then you mix that with Sidney Lumet's genius editing and cinematography, and it creates this really visceral experience for something that should be fairly dry on the surface. And it really enhances the film to be way more engaging and exciting and intense than it would have been otherwise. And I think that's the largest accomplishment of the film. It takes what is good material and uses the medium of film to make it an incredible film, to make it a classic, to make it something, you know, almost required viewing in a lot of people's opinions. And it's just such an effective, well-made movie. The only criticism I have with it, and I think this might be more an issue in terms of how we view discussions of racism and race today, where it is, again, you know, it is a film about racism, but from the perspective of middle-class white men, straight white men at that. And while I think it doesn't necessarily hurt the film, I think the film handles it with a decent amount of grace and isn't so tone deaf as to not be worth watching or to be offensive. But I think it is still an issue where, you know, if you're watching the movie and you're not getting invested because it's just another group of white people defending a person of color, I completely understand that and don't blame you for not getting invested and not wanting to watch it. But I think the movie does such a good job of focusing in on these people and keeping the prejudice in the background, not so much where you can't tell what's happening, but in the sense that, you know, a lot of the prejudice is more realistic to life, where it isn't someone saying, I hate those Mexicans, right? Like, no one really says that unless provoked, but if you're just talking about it, you're going to come up with a lot of people come up with different ways of expressing their prejudice, of trying to make it make sense almost, right? Of trying to make it work for them. So rather than some of the more prejudiced characters admitting, oh, I am racist and I dislike people that are different than me, they use excuses of like, oh, well, they're dirty, they have a lot of crime, you know, just using all the arguments in the book. So it is still explicitly about racism and about prejudice and how it clouds our views of other people, especially innocent people, children, ostensibly, you know, a teenager, but without getting preachy or without feeling, I feel like it's almost like without falling into the trap of a lot of Great White Hope movies, where you get to the end and they just go, all right, racism's done, everybody, it's all fixed. You know, they have their inner dialogue, they have their inner argument and debate, and eventually, spoilers for the end, but they all eventually decide unanimously that the boy is innocent. And, you know, the film ends with them walking away, going their separate ways, hinting that they've all been ostensibly changed by this experience. So while racism isn't fixed itself, they haven't completely ended racism, the individuals there have learned something, and they all have been taught to sort of think before they speak or think before they judge. Which again might lead into a little bit of racism's fixed, but it's I appreciate it I appreciate that it focuses on an individual level rather than a global level or a national level or a town level. You know, it's very insular, which again is the strength of the film, is how focused and direct it is. But yeah, it's an incredible movie. It's a classic for a reason. And because of that, it also comes with an incredible amount of special features. My favorite of which is actually the television version of 12 Angry Men that led to the film. Which, as far as I'm aware, I haven't seen it in a while, but I remember it followed it fairly closely. Just the cinematography is not as intense or interesting, since it's all meant to be presented like a play. So it's all almost one take, ostensibly, not counting commercial breaks, which is really exciting. There's a lot of great interviews. You get one with Sidney Lumet, with the screenwriter, just a whole bunch of different people involved with the film. You also get a play directed by LeMay, so you not only get the 12 Angry Men play, but one that he directed that was broadcast on television that led to him getting the job directing 12 Angry Men. You also get a history of the production, which is really fascinating, seeing how 12 Angry Men went from a script for a television play going on to a film and becoming a huge deal. And, well, then you also get a really great booklet written by Thane Rosenbaum, which, like every other Criterion essay, gives you context into the film's place in Sidney Lumet's career, but also in the world at large, and how the film wasn't exactly a big hit, but it was a critical darling and has since become a classic and well regarded. And it's just very interesting to see how that movie got made, and you know, how the studio was really scared to show it and didn't really have that much faith in it, despite it then becoming such a huge deal. But either way, fantastic movie, fantastic release, highly recommend it. Very easy movie to get in. You really are getting your money's worth with this release. But either way, thank you so much for watching. If you like the video, please like it. If you want more people to see it, please share it. And please subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, where next time we're actually going to be reviewing Anatomy of a Murder, another courtroom drama with Jimmy Stewart that is very, very interesting indeed. But either way, thank you all so much for watching, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.